morning and welcome back to Fresh Brew Marketing's YouTube channel. In today's In Conversation With, I'm speaking to Adam Parry, the co-founder and editor of the Event Industry News, a global online news portal for everything that you need to know about the event industry. And he's going to be talking to me a little bit about the event industry, the exhibitions, and the businesses that supply services to the event industry, and how this life in lockdown has affected them and how they've had to pivot and change to adapt to a different way of working. Stay tuned, coming up just after this. Good morning, and Adam, thank you so much for joining me in this next In Conversation With as we talk about the event industry. It's lovely to have you here.
No, Katie, thank you for having me on. A pleasure to be here, and hopefully I can help.
Absolutely. So, Adam, you are the co-founder of the Event Industry News, which is a global online everything about the event industry news portal, which is amazing. But you're also the co-founder of the Tech Awards, the Industry Event Tech Awards, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
which was fantastic because it's so pertinent to talk about exactly what we're talking about today, in how the event industry has had to kind of pivot and adapt to this weird new way of working, and what a lot of event companies have been doing during this time of lockdown. So I wanted to just jump straight in. So you've been in the event industry for a good number of years. Certainly I've known you for a good number of years too. And like many, this pandemic has had a diabolical effect on so many businesses, but the events and exhibitions themselves, but also the businesses that supply services to that industry. And with, things being canceled, it's pretty crazy. What has been your experience so far of the way that businesses are coping and trying to sustain themselves until this lockdown ends, whenever that will be?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very much different for different sectors within the events industry. When we look at kind of like the festival and outdoor market, unfortunately at the moment, there's not much that they can do until lockdown restrictions are released. Some organisers have postponed their events till a little bit later in the year, say August, September time, where they feel that they can go ahead and working with contractors, etc., to make that happen. Many contractors in that sector, though, unfortunately, have either had to very much furlough and shutter and kind of reconsider what this year may look like for them, or even try and utilize their products and services within other verticals or industries, so temporary structures to help with extra capacity around, let's say, Nightingale hotels. I'm even seeing some suppliers offer their services actually as opportunities for events to come back on kind of controlled attendance and things like that. So lots of businesses kind of in that market are very much looking at the ways that the technology, the equipment, the infrastructure, and the talent that they've got, is that applicable to other sectors? And some are being very successful at that. But it's a different situation for everybody. Conferences and meetings and exhibitions, slightly different bag. Again, they can't go ahead. There's been a huge rise in people offering consultancy advice, looking at how to market events and things like that when they come back. The exhibition and conference market has been somewhat successful in pivoting. I'm sure we're going to become very bored of this word very soon, but taking what was scheduled content online and providing that to their audience in the interim, and utilizing sponsorship opportunities to drive revenue through their business. Some already existing conferences were obviously charging for tickets, and they've transitioned that online again, maybe done a reduction in cost or up the benefits for attendees and stuff in terms of replays and things like that. So that's kind of where the exhibition and conference market has very much been, we had all this content scheduled, we can do this for our audience, we just take it online. Again, unfortunately, that has somewhat left the face-to-face infrastructure, the stand builders, the registration companies and all that kind of stuff at a point where they can't do anything with that equipment and stuff because the face-to-face event doesn't exist. But again, I think, and this is probably across the mark when it comes to the events industry, lots of people are taking this time to proactively plan what their business looks like post-COVID, what it looks like over the next 12 to 18 months, maybe 2 years, and actually taking stock of things as well. There's been lots of people that said to me that actually now growth is not the main concern. It's somewhat survival.
Hmm.
and then actually focusing on the work that means the most to them. What's the most productive? What's the most cost beneficial? It's not just about big numbers anymore. And I'm hearing that a lot from lots of suppliers. So it's really different depending on kind of what vertical you're in. And there is a lot of positivity out there. And I think people are just trying to find their own way, in
Mm.
my honest opinion.
And I think if we just park on that for a second, so a lot of the exhibition space, what from a delegate point of view, yes, they go because they want to hear the speakers speak. That's fantastic. They want to be able to experience certain things for the first time, etc. Great. All of that kind of content can be put online, so we can watch it from home or from our office, etc. But a large part of that is also about the networking element and the meeting and the face to face. And as a delegate, in terms of, I certainly, if I think back to Marketing Week Live and, some of the big marketing events I used to attend in London, a lot of that was down to building, business professional relationships, which is obviously not possible. So how do you see that happening now in a more digital space? And is that even possible? Is that happening at all? Or is it merely just, well, we're putting our content online, so key speakers and great, presentations of things that are happening in your specific space? But do you see that happening in any other shape or form?
It really depends on which part of the trade show element and the networking we're looking at, right? So, from an exhibitor to buyer perspective, there's absolutely the technology in place that can facilitate those relationships, facilitate those conversations and interest. Let's take car manufacturing. If you're a car buyer or a car part supplier, you can absolutely use technology like Zoom and Grip, Umbrella, and other matchmaking technologies like Expo Platform, etc., that are out there to do those one-to-one meetings. So that part of it is quite structured, quite good already, and some of those technologies have just pivoted ever so slightly to enable web conferencing. So that all can happen. But the serendipitous kind of interactions that take place at events, you bump. Let's say we bumped into each other at Marketing Week Live. We wouldn't have that opportunity because we're not walking down the aisles together. Now, technology can help us understand that we are in the same room, so we still might do that. But I think further on to that, what's also missing is, Katie, I know you and I know a guy called Paul, and you guys don't know each other, but you should talk and you should absolutely meet. And I'm not necessarily have that opportunity in an online event to make those introductions as easily and as smoothly as I would be able to a face-to-face event. So yes, some of that specialness, some of the reasons that you go to a face-to-face event don't necessarily at the moment translate online. I don't know whether they ever will. And I don't think we need them to, because that's what makes face-to-face events so powerful and so great. It is all that special connection of people all together all at the same time, and the homogeny of it all that makes face-to-face events so special.
So let's talk about the event industry news specifically, what you do from a content point of view. I mean, you were just saying you've been so super busy, which is fantastic, because obviously there is so much information to share and so much news to share about exactly those businesses that are changing and adapting to different ways of working. I'm sure the content of the news that you've been covering lately has also seen a massive shift, especially now that there aren't events specifically to talk about. But how has this affected your own work and how you manage your news content and the type of stuff that you publish? How has lockdown affected you specifically at Event Industry News?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose, a lot of the work that we would have done through the summer around how events are put on would have been very much focused on the outdoor market, agricultural shows, festivals, music, sport events, all that kind of stuff. And Event Industry News tended to do quite a lot of behind the scenes on-site interviews with organizers. Now that kind of pipeline of editorial content or work that we were looking at curating, it just evaporated. We can't go to those. So we were looking at kind of like, what can we do in the interim? Now, a lot of that capacity has been taken up by, initially it was, this event's cancelled, this major event's cancelled, this is another announcement, this is another announcement. We actually kind of drew a line at a certain point and decided not to publish any further cancellation news, because most of it was being covered by the consumer press anyway. And we wanted to change our focus. So our focus very much moved into, okay, the events industry is still going to be around post-COVID. There is no doubt about that. the events industry underpins every other sector on the planet. Every sector has an event of some kind. So let's move our focus to what are the options to pivot, what are the options to maintain, very much more positive information and sharing information. And some of that could be just, we've supported suppliers with them, offering, let's say, iPads to care homes, their infrastructure, tour buses to the NHS hospital to create sleeping arrangements for staff that can't get home and are just tired and all that kind of stuff. So it's industry focused, but it's not necessarily, let's say, very event specific. But we've very much changed our tact into say, and our line has come up, let's get ready to restart. And that's been the shift in the news that we've made. And that's been a very positive shift. One of the advantages to event industry news being online is that we track everything. We see the statistics, we see what people are engaging with. And our audience, this over the last couple of months, is up about 30%. Now, some of that is people are at home and they've got more time to engage with news and read. But I think people are, checking the headlines and keeping in touch with what's happening, looking for that positivity themselves. So that's where our focus has been moved.
I love that. Let's get ready to restart. I love that. Absolutely love it. You and I were just chatting before we started the video about marketing efforts and specifically, and during this period of keeping that conversation going. And you mentioned, in terms of advertising and sponsorship and things that you're still seeing that continue, which is fantastic, because there are businesses that are obviously seeing this as a time to keep that message going, to keep their brand awake, really.
Yeah. I want to be careful around this because let's be honest with you, there are lots of companies out there which, when it comes to protecting their business and protecting their employees, one of the first things to go is marketing spend. And I totally understand that. On the whole, it is generally an advantage to spend marketing in terms of company growth and company awareness. And if you can't do anything about that advertising in the short term, there does become a question of, should we do this? But other companies who are looking to either rise above it and raise their voice, the PPA have got a campaign on at the moment that says that when your competitor isn't advertising, your voice is louder. But even that said, I think it's still important to some degree to keep your voice out there and share positivity yourselves. As a company, to market yourselves, you do not need to spend money with a publication like Event Industry News to do that. There's social media accounts. You have an existing customer database. Some people are trying things like podcasting, etc., to kind of keep in touch with their audience. There's lots of ways that you can do that. And I think that's really important for every company to do during this time. Even if as a company they are not open, they cannot supply service, find content to share, engage with your customers, and find positive things to put out there. That will help keep your head above the water and people aware of you and think first of mind when things kick off.
And there is power in community, and a lot of certainly with some of the clients that I'm working with, the change in conversation has been that yes, they're not able to promote what they typically promote, but the conversation has been one of, well, this is what we're busy doing with, and we look forward to seeing you one day, and it's we look forward to being able to spend time together again when this is all done, and in that there is an engagement in itself, because the customers and the audience is responding to that. We're kind of all in this space where we're looking and going, no one really knows what this is going to look like when it's all said and done, but we're all moving through it. We have to move through it. We don't have a choice. And so it's just about, okay, well, let's be real, let's be transparent, let's be honest. And there is worth in that. There's value in keeping that conversation going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a good time to show the personal side of your company, right? Remind people that there are individuals within your company and teams with families, and kind of share maybe your own journey through the lockdown, the highs and the lows and all this kind of stuff. Start thinking about your communication with your audience and with your community, less about the corporate angle and the sales angle, and more about the company culture and how you're doing as individuals.
100%. So I just want to touch on something you mentioned earlier. You were talking about some of the businesses that you've seen seriously transform their positioning, and a lot of them are just changing their their absolute core of what they deliver, to be able to sustain themselves during this time, whether it's just survival or whether it's actual business growth. But one example I can think of was a classic, a typical event set builder, who only provided that kind of service, and has now changed completely to do a internal business office design and layout and that kind of thing. So completely looking at saying, oh, okay, this was what I only do, but now I'm doing something completely different. I'm sure you have quite a few examples of similar types of businesses doing things like that. Are there any that spring to mind of that have transformed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting and important to say before we go into some of these that, if you're a business that was wholeheartedly 100% all the eggs in one basket into the event sector, now is the time at looking at, are my team's skills transferable to other sectors? What do we do? Is that the same for other industries? If you're a stand designer, you've got designers, so they could design other things for other sectors that not necessarily as affected for as long as us, or maybe not affected at all. So interestingly, I was speaking to one of my customers who exhibits at Event Tech Live. They are a technology provider that provide heat mapping to events, so that event organizers can see how people move around the event and stuff, all anonymized. They are currently in conversations with a large supermarket chain about transferring their technology over to allow them to control the ingress and egress of people going into the supermarket, because actually one of the most high cost things to them at the moment is having staff on the doors to manage that. And you start to think, as I've been to like Tesco and Sainsbury's, in some cases it's 3 or 4 people at different stages that meet you on the way in.
Yep.
So they've kind of found a way to go, okay, well, our technology can help event organizers do this. What is an event? Well, it's a thing in a building. Other building owners, supermarkets, etc., are having these same challenges of allowing people. Now, we've not got to that stage in the events industry, but I can absolutely see that come along in our sector as well. Another one would be modular stand build options, which are now being provided to hospitals. I think everybody's seeing kind of like the GES with the Nightingales, etc. And that's actually filtering down now. Some of those companies are looking to offices when companies go back to work. And does there need to be social distancing measures? Does there need to be dividers within things? And we're not talking shell scheme here in all instances.
No,
That would be awful. But some of those, and even a shout out to a company called Evolution Dome. They are providing their structures to increase capacity at manufacturing places where they need increased production, but they also still need to social distance their staff. They can't do that within the current, let's say, factory space. They need to add space on. Maybe it's even space for people to go and relax a little bit more, because around catering, everybody going for lunch at the same time, all that kind of stuff. So lots of event industry suppliers have found their way to support other sectors who are there supporting things like the NHS, etc. And I think that's a really good story. I wish there was more out of that. So if anybody listening to this that's got a story like that, reach out to me, because we'd love to hear about it on Event Industry News.
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll make sure we put all the event industry news details in the description of this as well, so people can get in touch. But just talking about that, so looking forward, because this will end. We don't know when, but it will end. Looking forward for a sec, there's this notion that life will never be the same again, perhaps because it's really shaken so much of our core and the way we do things. What is your view on what life will be like in the event industry once we start to leave our homes and our offices and all that kind of stuff again?
Sure. So I don't think there'll be a cliff face. I don't think all of a sudden, Boris is going to announce that social distance is released and we can all go back to normal. I think it's going to be a normal part of culture that we will be slightly more sensitive to hygiene and transmission of diseases and things like that. That's not a bad thing on the whole. That's not a bad thing. What do events look like? Events will probably come back slowly. I think they'll grow to the kind of attendance levels that we've seen before, but everybody will be a bit more mindful about their role as an attendee within that event. And from, let's say, a prevention element for the exhibition organisers, for the contractors, etc., I think we'll just see an increase in tracing and tracking and things like health and safety and the progress. And we'll see probably a lot of an increase in tools and technology around that to be able to audit and make sure you've got traceability on that kind of stuff. And health and safety, because I'm grouping into health and safety because that's what it is. It's about our health and the safety of our attendees and contractors, etc. It will just play a part in that. There'll be sanitizing stations, there'll be processes to build and break, there'll be processes for attendees, there'll be more sanitation, etc. on site. But I think a lot of it will also be supported and driven by just general social acceptance that's the way it is. So people will play their part as attendees in that as well. I don't think we're going to, all start walking around in hazmat suits or anything like that just to attend an event. And I think we'll also see a transition to a predominant hybrid model as well when it comes to global events. That also plays in sustainability. Sustainability is really, really playing a big role in how event organizers manage their face-to-face events. People are very much more mindful of it from a corporate level, etc. So do I see as much international travel just to attend an event? No, I don't. I think, events will be somewhere close to what they have, but I think people will make a decision on, what do I want to be at this event for? Do I need to travel to it? Can I engage with it online? Is there an online element? How good is that? And that is actually really exciting for me as an event organizer, because one of the challenges that I have at Event Tech Live is I reach a global audience on event industry news, but my event is located in London, which means a large proportion of my audience can engage in my content but only post event.
Right.
They don't get that on site thing. So for me, that's really exciting in the sense that I can reach a wider audience, provide a better, bigger value for my exhibitors, and even some of those exhibitors might just choose to exhibit virtually. And for me, that means I don't need a double the size venue. So it means better cost analysis for me as well as a business. So I think we'll see a hybrid model, and I think we'll see a lot more practices around hygiene as part of the health and safety of delivering an event.
It's interesting because I think a lot of us have been forced to take up digital and to take up tech as part of our core offering. Where I was talking to someone yesterday actually about this. He is the director of fundraising for a hospice in the local area, and they've been forced to now look at digital as a way to continue their efforts. When in the past we'd be looking at digital or changing or kind of innovating as I'll get there when I have a second, but we've been forced to do that. And actually we are realizing that this is completely doable. The people that might have been a bit averse to doing something digitally because of fear of technology or not understanding how it works have now had to do it, and there is value. There's a lot of value in it, and I think it does open up a huge amount of opportunity for events organizers, fundraisers, advertisers, all that kind of thing. So it makes complete sense.
Yeah, and again, this is not just because we have Event Tech Live or the Event Technology Awards. I think it's really important going forward that being aware, at the very least, you don't necessarily have to buy into it, but being aware of the technologies, how they work, and what's available to you as a business if you do need to implement something quite quickly. Because let's be honest, software and technology can be implemented quite quickly. But if you've not done that research, understood the market, what's right for you as a business, who are the players, what are the costs, what does it take to deliver, and then also the talent within that business, either as an individual or within your team, to be able to use that technology and deploy it. Where some companies back at the beginning of the coronavirus were very much in that position and they were like, boom, let's go. They were ready. Others, all of a sudden, were weeks, months, if not years behind on the learning curve of like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
That puts you in a position where you can't be as agile as others. And that leads to problems where you have no option but to cancel an event. You have no option but to postpone massively. It costs a lot of money to learn. Maybe you've got to furlough staff, so it's all down to you. And worst of all, your competitor could overtake you because they've already got all that kind of stuff in place.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of advantages to technology other than just going online, around data, around revenue, around understanding your audience and all that kind of stuff. But I do think in a positive way, people will start to look at technology as more of a key role within their events business to better protect them long term.
And Adam, just final question to you. I'm asking this to everybody I speak to, but What have you learned during this period that has changed the way that you approach things and that you build strategies for future work, whether it's the awards or whether it's the event industry news or, you know, anything like that? But what have you learned that you can share?
There's a couple of things. I think one, that our team can absolutely work remotely. Now, I personally have worked remotely from the rest of my team for probably the best part of a decade now. So for me, not as much has changed on this, but my team have really shown that they can work remotely, and I think that's a great thing because. Not just for the financial saving on things like offices, but for their own well-being. I think, you know, having to commute to work, having their own safety and surroundings around them. And I think actually what we'd like to do as a business is invest that money that was made for offices back into the team in terms of doing cool things with them, fun things with them, respite, all that kind of stuff. Now, not every business is obviously like us and just got an office, they've got units and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. I think I've learned that actually some meetings can be Zoom meetings, and some Zoom meetings can be emails, and some emails can be a text
I
message.
hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
So I think I'm learning a little bit more about my own self in terms of like where I would have traveled and done a bunch of meetings. I'm based in Manchester, but done a bunch of meetings in London, let's say. I think going forward, I'll take a lot more keenly interest in them and go, right, is that a necessity? Can that be done online? Because that makes me more efficient. That makes them more efficient. And it keeps me closer to my little baby boy at home. So those are probably two key things I've learned. And over and above that, right, there's lots of things that can affect an event going ahead. But as an industry, we should be looking and realizing how resilient we actually are. You know, how key we are to other sectors. And I think what's really important as a final point is, and it's collectively all our responsibility, this, but that, you know, we're elevating the respect that the events industry has a whole in terms of how business works. You know, digital marketing is really well respected. Other sectors are really well respected, finance, banking, all this kind of stuff as the key cornerstones of business. And actually events underpin all of that. And without us, if events were to disappear but now, that would be that would play a huge role in the economic downturn, because events are used as the building blocks and platforms for people to do business.
Absolutely.
So I think I've also learned that actually we're gaining a little bit more respect within the wider communities of what an event actually brings in terms of value.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, you've ended on a fantastic note. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and I really wish you all the best as you continue to navigate this, and look forward for, you know, towards new opportunity, and I'm excited about the changes, and as a person in the events and marketing world, but also as a delegate that likes to go and attend these things. I'm looking forward to seeing how all of that changes. Thank you for your time today.
No, we'll see you at the next event then, Katie.
Perfect. And for all our followers and those of that and viewers that have watched this video, thank you so much for joining us today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please share the video and please subscribe to the channel as well, so that we can you can be notified when our next event, or our next video rather, comes out. And all of the information and connections, or rather connecting information to event industry news and how to get through to Adam's team will be in the description of this video. So make sure you keep watching there. But thanks for joining us today, and take care.